good friend of mine here today on the show, Todd Anderson, who is the 2010 National PGA Teacher of the Year. That's just the top of his accomplishments, but there are so many more. He's got 2 FedEx Cup champions in his stable that he's worked with when they won the FedEx Cup. But more than that, a very good friend of mine, somebody who epitomizes class, represents the game so well, and is a true catalyst for his players because of how he cares for them. TA, thanks for joining me.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's good to see you.
So talk to me about players right now. You're a stable of players. We got some weird times going on. You and I were on the range together at the Players Championship and went home for dinner, and Billy calls and says, "We're done." And it was like it's like the rats leaving turning on the lights, right? Everybody left. How have you managed this time?
Well, it's been interesting. I think everybody's somewhat challenged with the hand we've been dealt. We've been fortunate here at TPC Sawgrass and at our performance center where we've stayed open. You know, we're doing the social distancing and trying to be safe with the people we're contacting. But, the governor of Florida said golf's an essential business, which has kept us open. So we've been able to do what we love to do and teach. And I think the people want something to do. I mean, you get tired of being in your house all day, 24/7. And so it's been nice to be able to get out and teach a little bit. Obviously, we're not as busy as normal, but that's been good. The thing that's been a little bit difficult is that there's really no light at the end of the tunnel. The players really don't know, the elite players, the college players, most of the people that I teach and coach. There's really nothing for them to play in. The AJGA stuff is pretty much out. The college season's been canceled. We kind of know the situation with the tour. Hopefully that's going to, resume at some point. But so it's been tough because the players really have nothing to work towards. So different players have taken different paths. Some players are really trying to get in better shape physically. Some are just taking time off and trying to rest their bodies. Others are trying to make some changes. So it's different from player to player, but we just try to take it one day at a time and know that the end of this is coming at some point. And when it happens, just kind of be ready to get back to somewhat of a normal life again.
When you're talking to a player during this time, our professionals and our college players have never taken this much time off, and it's awkward. And I know psychologically it's weird, but what about the one question I hear about is, I don't want to lose my skill set. And I've been trying to tell people, like, look, we'll get a plan together to go back. You're not going to really lose your skills. You may erode a little bit, but talk to me from a physical standpoint, how you see that, because it is disconcerting, especially for players who are in spots that they can't practice. They're hitting balls into a net, or they've actually said, I'm taking some time off, which I think is good, but there's going to be that apprehension when they return.
Yeah, I think everyone has that fear that when you come back, things are going to be different. But most players are pretty comfortable with who they are. The players that I've worked with, most of them I've worked with for a long time. So they kind of know their tendencies. And so I've encouraged them, you don't have to go hit a lot of balls, but just go out a couple days a week if you can and hit some balls. If not, get in front of the mirror, do some stuff, look at some old video of tournaments where you've played well and kind of see them hitting good shots in competition. Just something to kind of keep their mind somewhat in golf. I don't want them to totally shut it down where they come back and it's like, holy cow, what is this thing I'm holding on to?
Yeah.
But just stay in touch with it in some regard. I mean, like you said, you may be hitting balls into a net, you may be swinging in a mirror, you may be able to go out and do a little bit of work, but do enough to where when it's time to go back to work, you're not starting from zero. You're kind of starting maybe at 50% versus at zero. That way it's a little bit easier to get back, but just stay in touch with your feels and your thoughts. And, you can do a lot, as you know, just through seeing yourself hit good golf shots and seeing video and visualizing how you want to swing and what it feels like and those kind of things. So not actually hitting balls, but kind of going through that process of what you're trying to feel, what you're trying to do, have a good, clear picture of it, and then do some stuff in front of the mirror or watch some old video or things like that. Just something to kind of keep your mind fresh on what it looks like, what it feels like. And so when you get back to having some time where you're really going to put the time and effort into getting ready to play again, you're somewhat ready to go.
You're one of your skills is the way you interact with your players, and having watched it for years, you have an amazing ability to step in when you need to, but to also just observe when you don't, and allowing the players' emotions to kind of bubble and flow. And how did that develop? Because it's really intuitive. It's a superpower of yours. And I mean that 100% as a compliment, because I think a lot of times young coaches, when they're working with players that are really good, they want to coach a lot. You have this amazing ability to know when to say the right thing, and then other times just to kind of stand there and be a calming presence, but not really communicate. I think it's brilliant.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, first of all. How do I guess trial and error more than anything. I've been doing this 36 years. I've been teaching golf. I've been on tour for, this is my 26th year, working with tour players out on tour, and they're all different. You have to know your players, I think, first of all, and understand they're all different, as you know. I mean, you work with a lot of different players, and they all have different personalities. They all have different wants and needs. And I think if you understand your players and kind of how they operate and how their mind works, it's pretty easy to know when to step in there and when to not step in there. And I told you this example years ago when Billy was the year he finished second to Tiger at the Tour Championship. His warm-up the first day was absolutely horrible. And I just sat there and watched him hit it all over the map, because I knew he was in a mindset where if I said anything, he was gonna rip my head off, basically, and start blaming, what is this going on? So I just kind of let him go. And then finally he just said, what the heck is going on? I said, well, your head's moving off the ball. And, told him a couple little things. This was probably 10 minutes before he had to tee off, and hit a couple good shots. Got his driver, hit some good drives, and went to the first tee. And I was telling Mark Horton, who's his stats guy, I said, this tee shot's going to have a big play in what he shoots today. And he drove it down the middle and shot, I think, 5 or 6 under, and ended up finished second. But if you would have watched him warm up, you said, this guy's not going to break 80. So I think there's a lot of times, like you said, I think it's best not to say anything and kind of let them work through it mentally. Other times you have to give them a little something. Hey, just getting a little quick, or, the ball's moving a little bit back, or you're aiming a little bit right, or whatever the case may be, because they're never that far off. You don't have to go in there and reinvent anything at tournaments. I like to do my teaching when they come to see me here at TPC Sawgrass, and I like to coach when I'm on tour. So when I'm on tour, I'm basically coaching them on the things that we've worked on in the past. I'm not going in and introducing a lot of new stuff. And I think that just comes with experience and understanding, how much a player can handle at tournaments. And a lot of that's done through your preparation when you're teaching them at home. How much information can they handle? Can they handle mechanical thoughts that have to be more of a tempo or feel type thing? Is it mostly pre-swing stuff that you can throw their way to try to get them to make the changes? And I think as a teacher, I think that's where you really need to be able to understand the cause and effect things. I see a lot of teachers now that work on a lot of the effects. They don't get to the cause, so I have a good understanding of cause and effect. I have a good understanding of how each player kind of works through changes. And I think you put those things together, and then understanding the player's mentality and personality, all three of those things kind of have helped me know when to say something, when not to say something. And, I'm not always right. Sometimes I say things when I shouldn't say, so it's not like it's a perfect thing, but I've learned over the years how to handle players, how to handle it when they're not doing well, how to handle it when they're playing well. And that's, it's just as hard when they're playing really well to help them as if they're playing really poorly. When they're playing well, how do you stay out of their way? And they always want something, that they have to have something. And so when they're playing really well, it's, what do you say that's not going to really change that much, yet they feel like they're getting something and they can still keep doing the things at a high level. That's the challenge. They're playing poorly. It's like they'll try anything and they'll listen to anything you're telling them. But when they're playing well and they've played well all week, they've prepared well, they get to the first round and they're out there hitting balls, and all of a sudden they hit a couple bad ones and they're like, holy cow, where did that come from? And then the panic sets in. Yeah. That's when you have to reassure them, hey, you're fine. Not when you were just aiming a little right, or you just got a little quick off the ball, just something simple to help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely. The one of the things that's been cool to watch, I mean, you've got players of different personalities, and, Billy is a consumer. He loves information. He loves his team. I've been able to do practice rounds. I don't work with Brant, but just to watch him and how he interacts. Lando, the number of players and the victories that you've had over the years. What are the foundations of when you're starting with a player? What are the things outside of the golf swing? I'm talking more like that coaching relationship? What are you focusing on? What do you want to know?
Well, I think first and foremost, I want to know what type of person they are. Like a guy like Billy, he's very mechanical. He's very much a perfectionist. He's you look at his closet, all the white shirts are together, all the blue shirts are together. I mean,
Right.
If you watch him, have the belt matches the shoes. I mean, he's very put together. So that he's going to be very much a perfectionist. So he's not going to like hitting the ball well and having the swing look bad. He wants everything to be just right. You look at so that's kind of his MO. So you have to teach him within that framework. You're not going to be able to change that. So you have to understand that, he's going to want everything to be just right. He's going to prepare. He's going to want to be very prepared. So it's going to have to be very organized, very systematic in how he approaches things. And you're going to have to teach him that way. This is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to do it. And he wants you to lead him down the road. He wants you to tell him exactly what you want him to do, how you want him to do it, how you want him to practice, how much time to practice. Or a guy like Brant, who's totally on the other side of the spectrum. He's all into feel. He's all into, hey, if I'm hitting it good, I don't really need that much. He wants to be prepared. He wants to feel like he's doing the right things, and not to say he's a very hard worker. But Brant's more into what does it feel like, and what's the ball doing? If he wants it to look good, but at the same time, if it feels right and the ball's doing what it wants to do, and I feel confident in it, then I'm going to keep doing it. So for a guy like him, you can't get super technical. You give him one thought. Normally with Brant, when he plays well, he has a key or a feel that he works with. It doesn't last forever, just something that tends to work for a while, and then you have to try to give him something different.
It's normally a different feel in the same spectrum. Yeah,
in the same spectrum. So with him, it's a little bit, it changes a little bit more often. Where Billy's very structured. I mean, it's this, and this. Brant varies just a little bit in what you have to tell him and how you have to tell him. So just as a coach, I think you have to understand, number one, their personality. Number two, how they learn best. And then most importantly is what things can you tell them that they can take to the course and play with? Because ultimately, it's great to know TrackMan numbers. It's great to know force plate stuff. It's great to know SAM Putt Lab, all that stuff. But at the bottom line, at the end of the day, it all comes down to, can they execute on the golf course in competition, and ultimately when it matters. And there's those stages of learning when you make changes. You can get a player out on the practice tee and they can do well hitting the same club to the same target, get a feel, and then you change clubs, they hit the different targets and kind of do more random type practice. And then it ultimately has to do something to transfer to the golf course. And so they may do well in practice rounds, but it's not transferring over in the tournament. Or they may do well on Thursday and Friday, but it's not carrying over into the weekend. So there's that learning curve where you kind of have to learn to do it in practice, learn to do it on the course, learn to do it in competition. And then learn to do it competition when it really matters, whether it's to win or make the cut or whatever. So you have to be able to understand what things they can do and they can't do, so that they can take it to the golf course and ultimately shoot better scores, because that's what we get paid for, is to help them shoot better scores. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that. It's easy to make a golf swing look good, but is it efficient? Is it repeating? Does it hold up under pressure? And I've, over the years, had a lot of guys where I make their swings look better, but they don't seem to hold up as well. So I think it's real easy in teaching to try to make every swing look perfect, to make every TrackMan number go the way it's supposed to go, to do all this stuff. And technology, don't get me wrong, is very helpful, but it's only helpful if you can make the numbers move in the direction they need to move to help the player shoot a better score. And I think that's one thing. I think this next generation of teachers, I think the ones that are going to be successful are not only the ones that know how to use technology, but the ones that know how to make changes that move the numbers in the direction they need to go to make the player feel comfortable and be able to transfer that into shooting good scores in competition.
Yeah, you talked about that earlier. It's the art of coaching, right? Is to take that information and filter it to the player. But in it seems like in all sports, and I know you're an avid sports fan across the board, the technology it's flirtatious, it's attractive because it's something concrete. But coaching is not; it's an abstract, right?
Yes.
What do you?
Yes, I think.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, I was going to ask you, how do you form that? Because what do you study? What do you learn? Is it observation? What is it for you to form that art?
Well, I think, I think there are different stages you go through in learning how to teach anything. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to have a good understanding of cause and effect and how the different components go together, because you see players on the tour, not every player has a neutral grip and a square club face. You have some players that have strong grips, you have some players that have weak grips, you have some players that have bowed wrists, you have some players that have cupped wrists. So how do you take those variations and put them together to where the player can efficiently and consistently hit the ball the way they want to hit it? And all players want to have a certain shot shape that they hit and a certain miss that they create when they have a miss. They like to have, if they hit a draw, they like to hit a little draw. If they miss it, they want maybe a little bit of a block. But so you have to put together a swing and a series of movements that work together to effectively help the player hit the type shots they want to hit. So I think that's really important, and technology can help you with that. I mean, the TrackMan can tell you whatever you want to know.
Yeah.
However, like any technology, it's not always 100% correct. I mean, you do get some odd numbers in there that aren't correct. And so if you go totally based on what the technology is telling you, it's good to use it as a reference and to use to get patterns and what the player is doing, but you still have to be able to make the adjustments to change the patterns to where they need to be to help the player hit the shot shape they're trying to hit. So, I don't try to get, what I try to do with each player is try to get them to hit enough balls to where I can see what their pattern is. And if that pattern's producing the shot shape that they like, then we're going to just try to work and stay within that pattern. If it's not, what adjustments do I need to make to try to get them back into the pattern that they need to hit, that they need to do to get the shot shape they want? So I think technology is good to use as a reference, but I don't like being totally dependent on it. I've done this for 36 years.
What you're looking at.
I know what I'm looking at, and I know what my eye says, and I know what the ball does. And if I look at my eye and I can see what the swing's doing, and then I can see what the ball's doing, I can pretty much work back and figure out what's going on. And TrackMan just helps me confirm that. And more than anything, it helps quantify, especially with younger players. I mean, they're all into hitting it far now. So if I have a player come and see me and I give them a lesson, and I say, okay, I want you to, make a little bit bigger turn on your backswing, and it's going to give you more distance. And then they hit a few shots. So that's going farther. Versus they come to me and they're swinging it, 95 miles an hour, and I make a few adjustments, and then they hit a couple and it went up to 100, and the ball speed went up, 10 miles an hour, and the ball carried another 10 to 15 yards. That's way more powerful than saying, yeah, you're hitting it farther. So I think technology has a great place in golf. I just think that we need to understand that it's a barometer as to what's going on in the swing. And you still need to understand enough about the golf swing to make whatever adjustments you need to make to help the player hit the shot shape that they want to hit.
Yeah, because I think that's what's important is under pressure, they're going to go back to something that's the most comfortable. It's like if you've got to wear a pair of jeans for a certain day, you're going to wear the one that is the most comfortable pair. And, I think sometimes coaches, I notice this with college kids because they're so talented today. And, it's kind of like a pitcher and me is when you got a 3-2 count and the bases loaded in the ninth inning, what pitch are you going to throw? You're not going to throw that changeup that you've been toying with. Unless you've gone through that series, you're going to go to that one pitch that that you can throw for a strike. And I find that sometimes coaches today forget that. And like, if I've got to hit a ball, if I'm walking down the fairway, the 18th hole on the 72nd hole, and I've got to get this ball in play, I don't really care what the zeroed out numbers are. If I got to hit a trap draw, I'm going to hit a trap draw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I call it, it's like a second serve or a go-to shot.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, if your A game's not there, if your first serve in tennis isn't working that day, you better have a second serve or you're going to give away every point. In the same way in golf, I mean, you have to have some shot that you can hit every single time under pressure, whatever. If you're not swinging well, I'm just going to hit my cut or I'm just going to hit my big draw or whatever.
That takes a lot of mental flexibility for a player to do that because, I notice a lot of players, they think that's a weakness in golf, but every other sport adjusts beautifully.
Yeah.
But golfers see that as a weakness because they're not doing what they said they were going to do.
Yeah. And I think one interesting point you just made up is how talented the college players are.
Yeah.
And how far they hit it. And, I have countless kids that are, their club head speed's 125, 126, ball speed 185. But when you look at what they shoot, their scores don't dictate that that's helping them that much, you know? So the bottom line, I think that everybody has to understand is golf is about controlling the golf ball and controlling how far it goes, controlling what direction it goes, how it curves, trajectory, spin, all that stuff. That's what it's all about. And the person who controls the ball the best from tee to green is going to shoot the lowest score. And all this stuff about hitting it far and all that kind of stuff, it's great, but is it transferring over into lower scores? And I think that's the bottom line. You still have to be able to make putts. You still have to be able to hit your wedges and your iron shots closer to the hole. And I see a lot of these college kids, they hit it far, but
they look good on the range, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, and they get a wedge in their hand and they can't hit inside 15 feet consistently. Or the ones that are going to be successful will learn that 7-iron down, you better be able to hit the ball close to the hole and you better be able to putt well, because it doesn't matter if you hit it 330 down the middle if you hit your wedge 30 feet, or you hit it 15 feet, you never make the putt. So you better be able to shoot a good score, because the players on tour are shooting low scores. And the reason they shoot low scores is because they know how to manage their skill set. They know how to manage the skills they have, and they go out and even on a day they're not hitting it perfect, they can manage it around and shoot 68. And, you know, use the pitching example. There's days when you don't have your best stuff, but
that was
you're
pretty much
able
my
to kind
norm.
of come up with some ways.
That was pretty much my
getting
normal,
guys out.
TA. That was pretty much my norm.
But you know how to get people out.
Yeah,
you know?
have to, right?
It's the same thing, and the same thing in golf. You got to know how to get the ball in the hole, even when you're not swinging your best.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tiger Woods is a perfect example of that. I mean, for a long time, he wasn't hitting it great off the tee. You know, when he drives it off the tee, he pretty much cleans up. But you know, the round he shot at where was it, at the PGA, when he hit it all over the lot on the front nine and still shot under par. That just shows you how good he is at managing, you know, his skill set. And that's why he's arguably the best player that's ever played the game, because, you know, not only was he really good, when he was really good and everything was clicking, I mean, he won going away, but he won a lot of tournaments where he didn't have his best stuff, but he was able to manage.
He used to piss people off saying in news conferences, I won with my B- game.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd clean up by 6 and people are like, oh my God, he's being arrogant. But what he was saying was, I had what I had and I beat you with it.
Yeah.
Like playing poker. What about your coaching development? You know, you've been in the game a long time. You've been around, but the thing that, you know, you've always developed an environment of teaching teachers. You surround yourself with other teachers. You're not a one-man shop. You like having other people around. I think it's a sign of your interest, your intelligence, your absorbing. You've always been like that. So talk to me about your coaching development and what got you in the game? Why did you choose this? And then who were your influences?
Well, I've had so many over the years. You know, I started, you know, playing golf and you know, I played at a decent level. I played at Alabama, but I knew in college that I didn't have the dedication. I didn't love it enough from a playing perspective to want to do it for a living, but I was really intrigued with the golf swing and playing with different players and seeing how different players played. And so I met a guy named Hank Johnson, who's from Birmingham, you know, Hank, and kind of got involved a little bit with him out at North River in Tuscaloosa when I was in college. And through him, I met a lot of the guys on the Golf Digest staff. And so I was able to go out and hang around North River when they had Golf Digest schools going on and work in the schools basically as a range assistant, which basically meant you moved bags around and you sat there on a range bucket and teed balls up for Davis Love Jr. and Jim Flick and Bob Toski and Peter Costas and Davis Love and all the, you know, the great teachers from the Golf Digest school. So I was able to watch how these different teachers interacted with their students. So a guy like Jim Flick, who had tons of energy and sold the information to the students. I mean, whatever he told you, like, yeah, that's what I need to hear. A guy like Davis Love Jr., who had just so simple, you know, just try to get your hands a little closer to the cloud in the sky. I mean, something simple like that. So the simplicity of him. And then Peter Costas, who was more engineering based, you know, so it was a little bit more geometry and physics in his teaching, and Chuck Cook was a little bit more that way. And then, you know, to guys like Bob Toski, who just was a legendary player and kind of came from a player's perspective. And so I was able to watch the personalities and the way they shared information to their students, and they were all a little bit different. So I kind of say, well, I like the way Jim Flick does this. I like the way Davis Love does this. I like the way Jack Lumpkin does this. I like the way John Elliott does this, and Bob Toski, or whoever the case may be. And so I just kind of started taking bits and pieces from each teacher that I liked and kind of created my own style and my own way of doing it. because I don't ever feel like you'll reach your potential if you try to be just like someone else. You only be a portion of what you are. So you have to be yourself, but to be able to be around the top teachers and be able to see how they communicated and see how they motivated their students, and to see the information that they distributed and how the student learned and how they would adjust their style depending on the student's learning style, was really what got me the foundation to be a teacher. And then from there, I just kind of learned through reading and through watching and through studying, and then a lot through doing. I started teaching a lot at a pretty young age, and it's great to have book knowledge. It's great to watch other people do it, but ultimately you got to get in the game and you got to figure out how to do it, figure out the best way for you to do it. So I learned a lot just through trial and error. I hate to say that because the people I saw early in my career, I probably should send them some money back for it. But I mean, basically I learned through going out there and saying, okay, I want to see if this works. I want to see if that works. And today I'll never give a student anything that I haven't tried myself. So I'll go out and do some stuff on video, and I'll hit some balls and try to get some feels and see if, is it doing what I want it to do? Is this a good way of doing it? So I think it's just been a process over the last 36 years of being around a lot of great teachers, learning from them, doing a lot of reading, studying a lot of video, working with technology, and then ultimately just a lot of hours out on the tee working with students at all levels. It's been kind of nice during this kind of downtime with all the tours and everything. I've worked with a few more, handicap players, let's say from 5 to 20, which I don't do very often. So it's been fun to be able to kind of go over the different style of teaching, and because there's different problems, but there's also different levels of problems that you deal with higher handicappers. I do a lot of the same stuff, but it's just glaringly more obvious.
Yeah.
So to be able to get out there and work with them, and they're happy if they hit 5 or 6 good shots in a lesson. A tour player, if they hit 2 bad ones, they're not happy. So it's a little bit different mindset in working with them. But so to answer your question, the Golf Digest schools, I ended up teaching with them for 10 years and working with a lot of good teachers, going to dinner at night, talking about students at dinner. What are you doing with this student? What do you see here? What do you do that? Just sharing information. And I always felt like I don't have all the answers, but working with other teachers, talking to other teachers, sharing information, I'm going to learn a lot more, and hopefully I can help them improve too, because we're all in this together. I think everybody, there's no secrets really, I don't think, in golf. And what knowledge I have, I try to do a lot of PGA seminars and talk to other pros, and I learn a lot from doing those as well. And I try to share some of the ways that some of the things I've learned over the years through other teachers or through coaching and teaching myself. And so I just feel like we're all in this together. There's tons of people out there that need help. Not one person can help them all. And I think the more we band together and help each other, the more people we can help, and the better it's going to be for the game.
Who do you study besides Alabama coaches? Who do you study for coaching outside? Because I think one of the things that I look at golf is it's really interesting right now with a new generation of instructors coming up who are very technology or very social media based. And what they've done is they've done a brilliant job of bringing their teaching to the masses and made it accessible. And so I think you've seen a reflection of that on the top 100 lists and stuff like that, as coaches have found new avenues. You're seeing that in baseball. You're seeing certain pitching coaches on Twitter who have gained a massive following because of their way of communicating different. So where do you study other kind of management? Do you study, I mean, you're around some top executives. You do a lot of that. Are there certain things you're trying to garner in that?
Definitely. I mean, well, first of all, I mean, I don't do any of the Twittering kind of stuff. I'm not really a big social media guy.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't put students' swings up because I don't feel like that's my place. It's their swing. I don't want to put their swing out there to the masses. So that's just my philosophy. Other teachers do it. That's their call. I just don't do it. I just don't feel like I own their swing. It's their swing, and I don't feel like I should be out there putting their swing on the internet in social media for people to look at. That's just my philosophy. But that's the next phase. A lot of people are doing that. They're doing that to show what they can do and to show their skill set and things like that. And that's their call on that. You talk, I mean, Nick Saban, I think, is brilliant. As you've been around Nick, I've read all his books. I love the way he coaches. I love his philosophy about the process and, being where your feet are. He has so many great analogies that you can take from football into golf. I love your stuff. I love Bob Rotella. I've read all his books. He's been a good friend of mine for a long time. And I look at his stuff. I do a lot of, motor learning. I like to read about how people learn, things like that. But I think anything that you can take from any type of coaching, whether it's football, baseball, you can always convert it over into golf and to try to give it to your students. I mean, you do the mental side of the game with several of my players, but there's always that interaction between the mental and the physical. And so
100%.
we have to be on the same page, and we have to be able to make sure that the things we're doing are gonna work together to make the player better, not work apart. And I think that's the key, is whatever you decide to do, whatever the plan is, the plan all has to fit together from all aspects, from how do you practice, how do you prepare, what changes you're going to make, how you're going to make them, how are we going to incorporate the mental side into making the changes. So I think that's really important. And I've worked with a lot of different sports psychologists over the years, and they all are good, but it's like finding a teacher. You have to find the one that works for you. And the thing I admire about you is that you come at it from a playing perspective. As a former pitcher, you knew what it was like there if you're working on some mechanical thing and all of a sudden you can't find the strike zone. Yeah. You got to figure out a way to get the ball somewhat over the plate to make a guy swing and try to get him out. And players, I think, respect that, because there are days when you're just not going to have it. Yeah. And are you going to go out there and try to search mechanically to try to change something? Or are you going to just say, okay, this is what I got today. I'm going to figure out, how I can just get this thing from A to B and figure out how to get it in the hole. And I think different players are different ways. Sometimes a player can stumble. I hear guys say, I was playing, and then all of a sudden I got a feel on number 4, and they turned it around and I went crazy and made 6 birdies coming in. Other times, guys, I just didn't have it. I just kind of had to figure out a way to get the ball out there. So I think it varies from player to player and maybe from day to day. But I think the important thing as a teacher is to keep learning as much as you can. You're going to read so much golf stuff. Sometimes you have to get outside the golf spectrum, look at other sports or other ways, whether it's motor learning, sports psychology, fitness, biomechanics, whatever, and bring it back into golf. But, I'm a very simple teacher. I try to keep things very, very simple. I feel like there's only a few things that a player needs to do to be successful and have an efficient, consistent golf swing. And I try to find what each player's tendencies are. And normally when they're off, it's usually 1 or 2 different things. And, a lot of players have left because you keep telling me the same stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
that's good coaching.
What you need, that's what
good
you
coaching.
Need. But I'm not going to, tell you something different just because you want to hear something different. I'm going to tell you maybe something different to try to get you to do the same thing we've been trying to get you to do. But I'm not going to go down a totally different path. And I think that that's important to understand.
Boy, that takes a lot of patience from a coaching standpoint to not jump on that bait, right?
Yeah. And I think the amazing thing that interests, that I hear too, is I hear all these analysts, well, I can fix this guy in 5 minutes, or I can do this, that, and the other. But it's way more complex than that, as working with the player. I mean, their body types are all different. They have different tightnesses in different areas of their body, certain part, they're not all perfect and can do everything you want them to do. Even a guy like Billy Horschel, we went out to TPI a couple years ago, and his ankles are super tight. He's got very tight internal hip rotation. His wrists have limited mobility. He looks like a machine when you look at him physically, but he has limitations. And so it's easy to look at a swing on video and go, oh, this guy just needs to do this, 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 and this, and he's going to play great again. Well, that may not always be the case.
Can't do it. Yeah.
No. And even, look at an old swing versus a new swing. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. Maybe he got injured. Maybe he's put more weight on. Maybe he hasn't been working out as much. So maybe there's things that are changing. And then you also got the off course and the mental side of it. It may just be nothing really physically. It could be something off the course that's bothering them, that's affecting the way they think on the golf course, or their frustration level goes up because of something that happened before they got to the course. So it's a very complicated thing when you look at all the different factors that go into playing, good golf at the highest level.
Yeah. If you had one mulligan to go back in your career, without naming names or situations, what would you do?
Wow, that's a good question. I need a lot of mulligans.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the one that would be the most.
But one that created a really good learning for you too, though. I mean, when I say mulligan, it's not so much that you didn't want to experience the pain of what you went through, but I think a lot of times coaches, when young coaches are coming up and they look at their catalysts, they oftentimes don't see the mistakes and the scars and the ouches that have happened, right? Those moments of crud. Like I can think back on one time for me, I had a player I don't work with anymore who I'm going to say allowed me to get pushed around, but instead of standing up for what I knew,
Mm-hmm.
I tried to play Switzerland a little bit.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think I lost respect.
yeah. And I think that's easy to. I had a player that hit a draw and loved hitting a draw. And I looked at his stats and then his golf swing. He's way underplaying, had a lot of slide, swung way to the right, hit a big hook. And I felt like if I could get him to hit a fade or a little less of a hook, that he would play better. And he did. His stats all got better. He had the best driving stats he'd ever had on tour. He had best proximity to the hole, putted terribly. But the big thing, I think, for me was I got the player away from what they saw. And even though fundamentally their swing was better, the club wasn't way inside, they had better rotation through the ball. Their stats were the best they'd ever had in drive, total driving, proximity to the hole, and had a bad putting year. But I think that's the one thing I learned is that, even if it's a little bit off, if that's what they see and that's what they desire to hit, that you got to bend a little bit and allow them to do that and try to work within that framework.
Yeah, it's a comfortable pair of jeans analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've got that one thing that they see and they like it. And as coaches, I think we've got to, really trust that. Last question is really, you're a catalyst for a lot of people. And this is on the Catalyst School, where we're really focused on the way that we are catalysts for our players, our other coaches, and people are in that. What is one thing that you could tell young coaches right now across all sports that are going to listen to this, not just golf, that will set them and give them that piece of information? It's like, man, that's a TA nugget right there that I've learned from, that I can take with me.
I would say that any change that you decide to make needs to ultimately influence what they do in pressure situations. In other words, if you're going to change something, it needs to be something that you see as down the road as the ultimate thing that may help them get to the next level, as opposed to, trying to make it look perfect. Anything that you do should ultimately either make the movement more efficient or more consistent or hold up better under pressure. So I think a lot of times we make changes, just because, your grip's weak. Well, should you change their grip if their grip's weak? Does it work with what they're doing? Does it help them hit what they're doing? So any change that you make ultimately has to get or move you in the direction you feel is ultimately where they need to go, as opposed to just doing it because it doesn't look right or it's not fundamentally what you read in a book.
Yeah.
And I think that would be one. And then I'll give you another one. I just think that you have to take each person individually and teach them as an individual and not put everybody into the same basket. Each person has their own way of learning. Each person has their own idea of what they need to do. And you need to stay within that framework and not get outside of who they are and what they can potentially be.
Thank you for all the guidance that you've given me and being a catalyst in my career. I observe every time I'm with you. I learn. I watch. You and I have a very similar style. I'll walk 9 holes and not say a damn word, but I'm constantly listening and learning and waiting for an opportunity. But a lot of that comes from you. I don't feel like I need to impart a lot. So I want to thank you for the impact that you made on my career and my life. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate everything you've done for me and my players, and feelings mutual. You're extremely good at what you do. And I admire the way that you handle all your players and the way that you are able to help them reach their peak performance and do it in a very simple and very easy way for them to implement the things you try to get them to do. And it's funny. I'll just end with this is, I heard Billy the other day on a podcast. He says, I don't know what Brett does to me, but whatever he does to me, it seems to help.
Yeah.
So that tells me when you do little things and they don't even know you're doing it to them, yet they see the results of it, that tells me that you're doing some really good stuff. So keep up the good work. I appreciate you letting me spend some time with you.
Absolutely. We'll have pizza in the British Open next year.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.